Welcome. Today, Lauren, Christine, and I are going to be talking about sun transits 30 and 55. So we're going to explore around, see what we can learn and what we can play with over the next two periods of 5.5 days. So I guess maybe Christine, you could sort of fill us in a bit here and get the conversation started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lois. We're almost in gate 30 today as we record. The sun will transit into gate 30 tonight around 11 o'clock my time, Central Time. And so we're recording this a little later than usual, so we're very at the very end of gate 49. Which we didn't talk about beforehand. I don't know, does anybody have any Gate 49 stories? Because I mean, it is revolution. Do you have any revolutionary thoughts or energies or inclinations before we dive into the Gate 30? I had my own little revolution. I did finally, and actually does map quite closely to the whole beginning of Gate 49, which is I just walked into my studio one day and I was like, ugh, this is enough. I've got to clear this out, right? Like, and so I really have like pulled everything out, decided whether or not I'm keeping it. If I'm not, I've got a place for it to go. And the studio's always going to be full. I mean, that's just what my studio is like, but it is much less full and it is much more like I actually know where the five different things of like spirographs are now in one thing of spirographs. And so that's been very, that is actually really helpful. So that felt like my own little personal revolution. Um, so yes, gate 30, here we go. Gate 30 is in the emotional solar plexus. It's the gate of feelings, and it is an intensely feeling gate. And so I would not be surprised if there is that intensity in your life between February 12th and 17th. Not just because of gate 30, but because of what's actually going on in the sky beyond the sun. We're shifting from this Aquarian moment into the Piscean moment. People that know anything about even the high level of astrology know that Pisces is known for its emotionality. And this is also true in human design. All of the emotional solar plexus gates, except for one, are in this part of the mandala in Pisces. So it's a very emotional time in general, where we're going to walk through each of these emotional gates one after the other. So this whole stretch of time, I suspect, will be a bit more emotional. Now, again, this is true every year. So, if you're doing any tracking of your own energy from year to year, this may not be unusual. It certainly isn't unusual. We're all experiencing it, whether we've been aware of it or not. But also this year, I think is particularly interesting from this emotional standpoint because all of the personal planets are in this part of the sky. They're all in Pisces, gates of the Pisces part of the zodiac, which makes me really think that this might be even more intensely emotional than we're used to this time of year. But in general, the Gate 30 is very much about and the other thing that's going on, oh my gosh, there's so many things going on. The other thing that's going on in Gate 30, the sun goes into Gate 30, it connects to Pluto in Gate 41, making a channel, right? And this is a channel of recognition. It is a highly emotional channel. So you have an emotional gate inside of an emotional channel, inside of an emotional stretch of time. I think you're getting the picture here.
Well, and Christine, we've got the new moon eclipse coming at the end of this gate. So we'll have all that eclipse energy building up to the end.
Yeah. Do you suppose this is why Valentine's Day falls in this period of time? It's just sort of all this intense emotionality going on. It's like,
I've never thought of it, and I didn't think of it during prepping for this either.
because I mean, like, why would it be any particular time of the year?
Right.
And, and this is when people chose for it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I know it has some lineage in past history and whatnot. I don't know that lineage very well, but yeah, it's very likely it has. Even back then, it was because of something going on in the ether.
Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting because there's so much in the emotionality in this one about like, well, desire is the shadow in the gene keys, and how our desires kind of run us. It's like and it's like realizing as I was sort of prepping for this is even as much as we could evolve individually, there's no getting rid of this desire. It's just a matter of like, how are we going to be with it? And or is it going to run us, or are we going to be able to manage it in some way? And I was thinking that was really fascinating because everything else kind of is like you can transcend, and like, no, not this one. So we're stuck with it.
I'm thinking about like all of this energy coming through because that's really what it feels like. And how do we stand in our own power through it and not get swept away? How do we stay in ourselves and not let someone else's emotions sweep us away? This is a really hard time anyway for that. It doesn't matter if whatever you're listening to, or you're going in the grocery store, or just out and about, the emotions are high already. And then we add this to it. And I think this is going to be a super important period of time to hold true to ourselves and to hold true to our own truth. And we've had several gates coming up to this to get really clear. What is it that's important to us? What are we willing to stand up for? What will you fight for? So all those were in preparation. And now I feel as if this is a real testing gate.
Yeah, it's interesting. So this gate in particular, each of these emotional solar plexus gates carry a particular fear, and that's just the nature of all of these awareness gates in our body graph. And the fear of this gate is the fear of fate, which is kind of like I've been trying to suss out like what does that mean? But listening to you guys talk, I think, part of what this energy is searching for is truly surrender in many ways, right? Like we have these desires, as you said, Lois, they do not go away, right? They are part of our makeup, but the key is not to try to push them down or to, ignore them or to struggle against them. The key is like everything in life is just surrender to it, right? And that the fate of our life is that, right? That we are either fated to struggle against it constantly or surrender to it. And so I don't know. I just think that it'll be interesting for me this week to just notice that, like, what is, what is coming up for us. And again, we live in this really heavily conditioned, desirous culture too, right? And so even discerning what is truly a desire of our own and what has just been planted in our brains, that alone would be an interesting thing to to play around with a little bit in this few days.
I was thinking though, with like, because we've been talking a lot about like I, individual, and what we need to do. And there was like this strongly collective aspect to this particular gate. And it's like this desire and this evolutionary force moving us. Because if we didn't have any desire, nothing would change. And so there's this what's been moving humanity, I don't want to call it forward because it's like not so being directional, but the evolutionary charge has been fueled by desires. And and in that it doesn't really care much about the individual. It's like when we can succeed or fail and in individually, but in the long run, it doesn't make that much difference to the overall outcome. So it's kind of like we're here um, biologically to reproduce. And if we don't live any longer than having reproduced, we don't count as a failure, right? We were a success. And so it's this sort of a push and pull between the individual and the collective that I think I'm trying to point at here. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I know it totally does, and it is. You're absolutely right. It is a collective energy, and so it's 100% this. I mean, and essentially, what the desires are in this stream, it's a stream of feeling, right? It's the desire to feel. It's the desire to experience. It's the desire for new, for new experiences, right? And this is exactly what you said. That is what evolution. That's our biological imperative, right? Like we cannot stay doing the same thing repeatedly endlessly and be, you know, biologically sound, quite frankly, right? Like we know this. And so it is, you're absolutely right. It is a collective energy. And, I think well, we're all feeling collective energy right now, right? Like we just can't get away from it. And so, yeah, this will just be a slightly more heightened experience of it, I think, the next few days.
The interesting thing about this, though, because one of the things Richard Rudd talked about is like how important actually making mistakes is in this. And when we look in our lives, like some of the biggest learnings we've ever had come out of our mistakes. The things that went easy, they just kind of slide through. But our world has a thing against making mistakes. You're not supposed to make mistakes. And so there's sort of a conundrum there for us too. And so, like, because like at work, you're not supposed to make mistakes. And yet, I mean, we wouldn't have sticky notes if somebody hadn't made a mistake. So how we look at it makes a big difference.
I don't quite know how to weave this in, but I know what's coming up for me for a Gemmo is Hawthorn. And my experience of Hawthorn is that it makes room for us to make mistakes. It makes room for others' mistakes. And it is a extract that I would say enables us to surrender to what is. What's really interesting about it on a physiological level, it works to block the fight or fight response. So it actually doesn't allow you to go there. And so what does that mean? That means you have to stand there in the face of it. And it strengthens your reserves so that you can do that. And it's interesting when I was looking at the Oracle message for Hawthorn, it shares that Hawthorn signals an arising willingness to face and transform. And that's something we haven't really talked about yet in this time period. Transform those emotions you have, and that it's here to support your efforts to step forward and soften what you feel resistance towards. And so we're going to feel a lot of resistance in these days, 100%. And so I think that's another indication that that your system is becoming a little dysregulated, and there's a need for support. But as far as the collective's concerned, I just have to share this because this morning I got this idea that this energy of these gates is collective. We're all feeling it, but just like weather that comes through, we all experience it differently, and we all will look out and go, this gray day might be really enjoyable for someone that enjoys a gray steely sky, but for me it might feel depressing. So this is the same thing about what's coming through. We have this collective energy moving through just like weather, but we all experience it. But on a funny note, I got this idea, well, maybe we need to be giving the collective the Gemmo in a little dish, setting it outside for the energy to just absorb and carry. And so it'll soften our experience a bit. So if you want to play along with me with that, please feel free.
There was something that you said about surrender that there was a thought that came up for me uh, when I was sort of getting ready for this, and it's this like unwillingness to face the what is and be with what is, and to feel all of the feelings that come. And one of the things that popped up for me was a couple that I know. Now, this couple's been married for over 60 years, and I've gotten to know the wife quite well. And one of the things that's come up in conversation quite often is how it's almost like how you can't get too close to your spouse because when you lose them, it'll hurt too much. And I was like, and I went, and yes, and yet, what is she missing in the depth of their relationship? Just because it'll hurt, I'm not going to feel here. And there's something sad to me in that, right? In being in that, well, I would rather like fully love um and yes, I mean one of us has to go first, but it's the way things are. So that willingness to surrender to life and to trust life and not hold it at arm's length. Because I do think it's like in the repressive and the reactive aspects of this, there's a pushing away of this so that you're keeping your bandwidth really small and safe. So, yeah, you're nodding, Christine. You've got something to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't think this lady has gate 30. Right? Because I don't know that this is a thing that somebody with this energy could do, right? Like I think that's part of the struggle of this gate is feeling this full spectrum of feelings, right? And there is a real desire to feel, right? And to shut that down, I think maybe somebody like me, I don't have that. I could probably do that, right? I could see where she's coming from, but that's a lot of energy, right? It takes a lot of energy to not feel, right? And it's just interesting to think about, how much of that you could actually suppress. And like this is a gate that I think many people try to suppress because again we have a conditioned world that does not like our emotionality, especially as children, right? And this gate and actually gate 55 that we're going to talk about next are probably the two most outwardly emotional gates in the whole system, right? And so they are part of channels that very much show up in the world as that classic emotional thing, right? They have moods, they're moody. And so, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I'd like to see her design. Can we make that happen, Lois?
Find out.
Yeah.
But it seems to me is that there's an embracing of what's coming, right? And just sort of being with it. And even if it is uncomfortable, to say, that's what this is right now. And to not be so afraid of it. But it's also like we don't act on our desires because we're afraid. Or, well, not afraid. Even sometimes it's like, well, I'm not supposed to do that because it's bad for me, according to some authority. And to say, well, if I'm acting on that all the time, probably it would be bad for me. But there's all kinds of things that fall into that category that if you only do them once a year or something like that, go for it. It's like, have a glass of wine that you wouldn't normally have, or go to a party that you wouldn't normally go to, um, but experience it. Because I think that's what we're here to do is experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You're also bringing up, which I hadn't thought to bring up yet. You're bringing up the gate polarity in this energy, right? So the polarity is gate 29. It is literally the gate of saying yes, right? And so there is this supporting nature of, the mix of the sun in 30 and the earth in 29, the sun, the earth, I'm sorry, the gate 30 wanting this new experience, and gate 29 being, yeah, say yes to it, right? Say yes to life, say yes. Now, The shadowy side is you say yes to too many things, you right, you overcommit, you get yourself into, situations where you can't get yourself out of them easily. So that is also true, but there very much is this desire to experience new things, and you only really do that when you say yes, right? And so there's definitely this is like a package deal with these two.
So maybe in this case, it's just in the moment between the desire and the saying yes, it's just to have a quick pause to make sure it's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's where your authority comes in, right? Your inner authority. You got to check in, got to take a pause, like you said, and see. And sometimes too, the other thing is, we talked about mistakes also. Like we all know this. Like we have all had experiences in our life that we said yes to and seemed amazing and turned out awful in some form or fashion, and we learned a ton, right? So this is part of living, right? Like, this is just what we do. We have to make a bunch of bad decisions too. Like if we didn't, I'm like, like what would we actually learn? Probably not near as much. So
And we survive.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, Yeah, and I also love this Hawthorn as a Gemmo too, because the other thing that's going on as we are in this period of time for all of us is that, this Pluto and Gate 30 dance is going to keep happening after the sun. It's going to be the other planets that are going to go through Gate 30. And so we have this root to emotion energy on for a while. And then on top of that, we have the emotional center to the heart on because of the north and south nodes right now. And so all the way through May, we're going to have a lot of this collective definition in the whole, world. And when I think about Hawthorne, I think about the heart, right? We talked about a little bit about that and just this supportive energy. So a lot of people aren't used to having that heart definition. And though it can be, I mean, it's a will center, right? It can give you this extra energy. It can give you this push to get through things that you might not have been able to get through before. It can be a bit of a protection from, your own worthiness in the world. Sometimes you'll feel better sometimes with this definition. But I think also it's true that people that aren't used to it, and that's 60% of the population, they aren't used to this energy. And I think for the long period of time that it's actually being activated through May might really, like something like Hawthorne could really, really helpful to support, like, oh my gosh, I have all this energy in this place that I'm not used to having it. So I wonder if that too may play into it being an excellent Gemmo. Um, so we move out of gate 30 in, what did I say? I said it earlier. It's the 17th, which is the eclipse, right? So that day is going to be crazy. The 18th is also a very activated day for all of us from a human design perspective, so much so that I can't even tell you all the activations. I will just note to you, pay attention to what's going on the 17th and 18th, and I would suspect maybe try to do as little out in the world as you can. That would be my suggestion. Um, and so from gate 30, we move to gate 55, which is another emotional solar plexus gate. This is, instead of the collective energy, this is an individual energy. And gate 55 is the gate of spirit. And this is spirit, not like, I don't know, not like God spirit, but like the spirit of, like the essence of humanity. Like what is the spirit of the like team spirit, right? Like what is the collective, I can't even think of a better word for it, effervescence almost, right? What's the thing here that really lights us up and makes us interested and makes us emotionally connected to something? This is what gate 55 is. And it is the most, like I said, the most emotive of the solar plexus gates. So it is also associated with abundance, right? It has this idea that there is like an abundance mindset in this space when it's in its highest expression. And it's also very much about well, I mean, in the not self, it's actually the not self of it is falling in love, right? Which you would think, like, how is this a not self problem? But the gate 55 can get too, it can be too much, right? It can be seeking too muchness as opposed to being again, it's another place where we have to think about surrender, right? Like how much is enough? What is an abundance mindset? What does gratitude look like in this space? Um, Always seeking more can be a detrimental energy in this gate. And so paying attention to that, if that shows up, right? Are you feeling scarcity? That's also a good thing to notice in this time period.
Well, with that though, there's like it's interesting because there's desire in gate 30 and now we have longing in gate 55. And it's like sort of there's a nuance in the differences there. But it feels like people are chasing um, certain desires, certain longings, and they then you actually get something, right? Like you achieve a certain thing, and then that's not enough. Or like you can have an experience, like your first experience of something, and it's absolutely amazing, and then try to recreate that again forever, and it'll never meet that expectation. And so it's almost like we run on these highs and lows, and there's like a drama that's going on in this emotional wave that's going through, and none of them are ever quite right, and it's like if it's not, it's not where we want to be, then we're working towards that. And if it is where we want to be, then well, I want to stay here, and we can't do that. So it, it's I think it's a difficult place to be because nothing's ever quite right.
That is a hard place to be, isn't it? I'm hoping that some of what we gain from gate 30 we can bring into this gate 55 with us. And I think that's always the hope, that it's not like we're walking through rooms and closing doors, right? We're bringing something with us from this place to the next. And so I'm thinking about this wealth of resources that could be available in this abundance, and also all the decisions that we'll have to be making with that, and decisions about what we have to do, and how to allocate them, and how to use it. And so Hillary Barrett asks the question, what decisions must you take now, right now? And I think that might keep us out of overwhelm, is just thinking about what decisions about this abundance, about what's coming up for us, do we need to take right here in the moment, and let everything else go, because this is a very overwhelming time. So I think we have to be very cautious of our energy still.
Yeah, and it is, again, since it is an individual energy, all of our individual energies carry a melancholy, right? And there is this kind of like, you know, they're all very, unique. Like the melancholy of this, the fear of this is a fear of feeling empty, right? Which is, again, I think very, very clearly on offer everywhere we go, right? And so noticing that in this time frame, from the 18th to the 23rd, um, because I do feel like a lot of us feel empty in this emotional space, right? Like this is, I think, what's coming up for a lot of people now post pandemic, and seeing all the crazy that's going on out in the world, politically, this connection, right? This ability to connect into other people in a way that feels real and feels meaningful, I think is really lacking for a lot of people, right? I think a lot of people's day to day feels empty in that way. Like, yeah, whatever, you go to work and maybe you like some of the people, maybe you don't, maybe you like the work, maybe you don't, right? Like it's just, I think there's a lot of meaning seeking going on right now in a way that's very specifically looking to fill us back up, right? I think a lot of us feel drained in so many ways. And so this energy is here, obviously, to offer some of, to understand, like, what is the spirit? What is making our spirit shine and sing, right? Like, those are the things we're supposed to be noticing. And often those things aren't things that make us money, and they aren't things that somebody told us should be doing, or they aren't things that, we were conditioned to believe were good for us. But yet, somewhere inside of us, this thing is showing up saying, hey, that's a thing that you're really interested in. That's a thing that really is inspiring to you. And those are the things I think we really need to start paying attention to. Because every one of us has deeply individual things that that are true for us, that are our things, right? And this homogenization that we've gone through as modern beings, I think, has really gotten us away from our own inner spirit.
That brings up the sort of the individual and collective thing again here for me, because there's like in this particular gate and being very emotional, and that we are responsible for our own emotions, and yet we are moved by the emotions around us and what we're supposed to be feeling so much of the time that we don't pay attention to our own emotions. And what the other thing is that we either feel like we're the victim of what's going on, or we turn around and blame other people for what's going on as a way to escape that. So this need to like take back ownership, because like it's been said many times, is that nobody can actually make us feel anything. And that's true to the extent that like somebody can say something to you, and it will hurt, but that's because it was already hurting in here. Or you can feel really good about it because, well, it was already feeling really good. It just gets sort of triggered. And there's people, those often the people closest to us, that know where those triggers are, but and they know when to push them. But by and large, we're still responsible for our own emotions. So I think this would be a really good time to pay attention to what am I really feeling? And if you get triggered, to go like, so what's that about? Yeah, it must be like, if it's something that hurt, is that it must be something that I believe. Why do I believe that? And there's got to be a Gemmo that works with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to tie it into that, Lois, and I think I can do that. So Oak is actually the Gemmo. So I have deferred from where we were last year at this time for the last two gates, but I'm seeing them different. So if you do have a calendar, you might want to update that in yours. So Oak taps into a number of things both of you have talked about. So as far as what you were sharing, Lois, Oak gives that rooted strength that allows us to really stand strong into what I think, I believe, I feel, this is mine. It also taps into that fear of emptiness. And Oak is actually very good for folks that tend towards that melancholy state and feeling as if they're lacking something. And I think what it does is it gives that rooted strength where you realize, oh, I'm really not. I actually have everything I want. And the way that it works is actually with the neurotransmitter dopamine. And dopamine is what propels us forward and gives us that energy for movement, to take action. And that gets us out of our melancholy. And it's not about filling our empty holes. It's about taking action. And this is a really interesting thing, because Christine, you were talking about this emptiness so many folks are feeling, and I think they have, because we've gone through this period where we've all shed so much. We've had to say, well, that thing I believed in wasn't true, and that thing doesn't work anymore. And those people I thought were my friends really are behaving this way. And we've done this over and over again. So if those things were what made us feel full and we've shed them, we are feeling empty. And so the remedy to that would be to go deeper, right? Because there's actually more of yourself in there that you probably haven't recognized or talked to in a while. And I think oak will help that because it's giving us that strength and the courage, so we can play on that courage we got from Hawthorn, from the gate before, to take action and move forward, make decisions, make choices, know how to allocate your resources. I think I could keep going, but maybe that's enough about oak right now.
No, I love that. And you're saying oak, like the tree oak.
Like the tree oak
Okay.
with a
Well,
K.
I really like that, especially because again, when I think about the gate polarity to 55 is gate 59. And gate 59 is the gate of sexuality, the gate of intimacy, it's the gate of connecting, right? It's a very tribal gate. And I think about oak as being kind of a promiscuous plant, right? Like part of the reason they're so like they cross, I mean, there's all kind, right?
Yeah.
Like they cross in all kinds of ways and they meet up with each other in all kinds of like they're much more like, at least my understanding is they're much more like, cool, you're part oak, you're good for me, right? Like, you
We'll
know?
work something out.
Right, right. You know, it's so interesting. And so, but again, they want to connect. And part of the reason they're such a successful species is because they will do that, right? Like they're really strong in that way. But Gate 59 is here again, like trying to get us back into the spirit, right? Like we're fully self-contained beings, but what makes us humans is the ability to interact with others, the ability to have relationships, the ability to be with others, right? Like that is the spirit of life. And so Gate 59 is supporting this thing about getting this individual nature that we all contain bumping up against other people's individual nature, right? So that we can find the joy and the love and the wonderment in all of the things, right? And so that's what we're designed to do. We're just living in a world right now that pushes us up against each other in all the opposite ways, right? And so this is a real opportunity to remember, like this spirit is what we're here for. This interconnected spirit is what not only makes life worth living, but it's what energizes us, right? We gain energy from one another as well. And that is very important to how we move forward into the future. We can't do this alone, right? It's we've used it several times here. It's that Francis Weller quote, right? It's the solitary journey that we cannot do alone, right? We all have to do our own work. We all have to do our own thing, but then we have to bring that thing into the collective. Um, and we have to allow the collective to support us as well. This is the other thing we don't do so well as modern, especially modern white women. Right?
It is fun, interesting because you're talking about sort of the higher level of functioning, what these when they come together. But I was thinking about Richard Rudd talking about the two shadows of 55 and 59. So we've got victimization and dishonesty. And he makes a comment there, which is what leads to us becoming our own worst enemies. And so, like, sort of in this trying to grow and transcend past this, to stop becoming our own worst enemies. And this made me think about the coherence idea that we've been working with in the how well do I understand what's actually going on? How well do I understand what it is I believe? Because that gives us a base where we can have discernment, right? And without discernment, yeah, we do wind up being our own worst enemies. So getting really clear about what's going on so that you can make good decisions for yourself. It makes a lot of sense with this particular area, especially when it's emotional. Well, that's that.
Guess we did it again.
So thank you for being with us, and we hope we'll see you next time.